Your damned house is burning down. So I don't want to preach to the choir anymore. I want us to get out there at scale and let's solve this damn problem if we want a future.
Regenerative, organic, biodynamic agriculture and building healthy soil is not going to save this planet or humanity. It's much deeper than that. And the answers actually might land in holistic management. In this conversation with Allan Savory, founder of the Savory Institute, we take a look at the questions we need to be asking ourselves, the policies that need to be changed, and how we can actually change policy, change the way we grow food. We take a look at what we need to do to be in partnership with biodiversity, to be in partnership with nature. I'm Natalie Forsbauer, founder and publisher of Heart and Soil magazine. If you haven't joined our newsletter yet, it's free. Head on over to heartandsoilmagazine.com and you can sign up to receive our newsletter, which goes out about once a week with tips and tricks and strategies for regenerative farming, gardening, and living. If you're liking these interviews and you find value from them, then please share them with a friend. Spread the information and knowledge about how we can live in harmony with the earth and be a collaborator with nature instead of trying to control nature with chemicals and all the things. If you haven't subscribed to Heart and Soil yet, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you know when all the new interviews drop. And share this channel with a friend who's into regenerative farming, gardening, and living, or organic farming, gardening, and living, to help spread the word about what's possible with global regeneration. You make yourself an amazing day. Big love, bright blessings. Namaste. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy this conversation with Allan Savory. Allan, thank you for joining us today to talk about where we're at in the world today and some of the solutions that you are discovering, some of the questions that you have about where we're at, and just what's on your heart as you are in the season that you're in. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Natalie.
Yeah. Allan, I'm so curious. You are known around the world for your work in holistic land management and around the world for your TED Talk. And I'm so curious, what is on your heart most today about where we are in the world today?
It's deep concern. You said it there. I'm best known for the TED Talk. That's a small fraction of my work, etc. So, and land management. No, I'm not about land management. So there's a tremendous lot of misinformation out there. And I think what we'll be discussing today is certainly, as far as I know, the most urgent, dangerous situation ever throughout human history. So the issues we'll be discussing are much deeper than what as you said, I'm known for. And most of what I'm known for is called snake oil salesmanship and not based on science, which is complete trash. So it's good that we're discussing it. I'm very concerned for the whole future of humanity, and if I had to summarize it briefly, how would I do it? Probably to say we live in a biosphere. I read this account from a space person who'd been up in space for hundreds of days, observing our planet and seeing it as a living entity with a thin skin of atmosphere around it. It's called a biosphere because there was no oxygen until there was life. You and I and everybody listening is dependent on that oxygen. That oxygen is dependent 1,000% on life, biodiversity. It's biosphere. And you can read almost any paper, anything today, and biodiversity is in free fall. We are destroying our human habitat. And so organizations like yours are worried about health. You're worried about soil. You better worry about things much deeper than that. You better start worrying about the cause. Why are we doing this when so many people are so intelligent. We can put a person on the moon. We're talking about colonizing Mars. When you've got so much intelligence, so much goodwill in the world, why are we, to put it crudely, shitting in our own nest? That's what my life's work has been about trying to understand.
When did you first notice that we were shitting in our own nest?
I first noticed it when I was 21, I think, 20. In fact, I was 20. I was working as an intern, a volunteer with the game department of Northern Rhodesia, as Zambia was then known, in the 1950s. Then I joined the game department. And then by the time I was 21, I was the first ecologist, probably enjoyed joining any African game department. I was in charge of a very large area, a bit larger than the UK, as a 21-year-old. And I observed that wild areas of Africa that we were setting aside as future national parks were losing biodiversity. That didn't make sense. We couldn't blame colonialism, corporate greed, politics, slavery, all the things that were being blamed. You couldn't blame carbon, fossil fuels. Why was it happening? And I had Sir Frank Fraser-Darling, who became a friend, stay with me for 6 weeks in the bush, in camp with me, day after day, night after night. And he had no answers, and he was probably one of the world's top ecologists at the time. That's why he was knighted. And I was a 21-year-old responsible for it, and government expecting answers from me. And I realized, oh my God, we professional people haven't any idea why this is happening. All the things we're blaming, poaching, etc., are not causing it. So my life changed at that point, and one way or another, I became determined to try to solve this. And later in life, I came to realize, oh my God, this is the most important problem facing humans. So it was accidental. It wasn't any wisdom.
Mm-hmm. And so if you could summarize the most important problem facing humans today, what would that be?
Destroying our own habitat. You can live longer without food and water than you can without habitat. If you don't believe that, try living underwater for 5 minutes.
Right. And what do you see as the solution to taking care of that?
Logic and science. Science is logical, ultimately, and logic and science will tell you exactly the same answer I will. The only, and I stress that, solution is to address it at the root cause.
And
Every mother knows that, should teach her children that. If you've got a headache, what's the cause? It's no good me feeding you aspirin and codeine and all these things until you're getting ulcers and high blood pressure. I need to know why you've got a headache. Oh, Tommy banged you on the head. Let's make sure he doesn't do that again. It's that simple. You address the cause of a problem or you never solve it. Mm-hmm. And nobody, other than our organization I represent and the work that I've been doing with thousands of other people, nobody else in the world that I'm aware of is even discussing the cause of the problem. We are blaming fossil fuels, we're blaming livestock, some people are blaming corporate greed, etc., etc. We're blaming politicians, and you're just seeing more and more chaos and problems in the world. And underlying them all, you've got the same cause. Our inability as professional people, experts, governments, to manage the complexity of what we do manage to produce the food and everything else that makes civilization possible.
So if you were to summarize the cause.
Very easy. I summarized it in 12 minutes with a solution. I did that 2 or 3 years ago at COP26. The cause of it is how we manage at scale. And how you and I manage our lives. Every human is managing their life. That's the human scale. And at the human scale, we can manage our family, our economy. We have to finance our family. And then we'll manage some aspect of nature to produce whatever we produce: meat, milk, wine, cell phones, smartphones, bombs, cars, computers, whatever we produce. Everything comes from nature and returns to nature. So that's what we manage. Now, at scale, we have to do it through organizations or institutions. Most people can't even make a toothbrush today because it's made by a company. Most people can't make the dress you're wearing today. They can make it, it's made by a company. And so it goes on. Everything at scale, even religion, is managed through churches, church organizations. You cannot escape that. Now, so the management of our resources, fossil fuels, livestock, soils, forests, fisheries, all these things, is done at scale by governments through policies that lead to laws, regulations, taxation, etc. I didn't realize a lot of this with the clarity I have today until I was president of a political party responsible for doing it. At that point, I realized, oh my God, I realized every political party, dictatorship or democracy, does this exactly the same way. And that is the cause of the problem. It's not bad intent. It's not lack of knowledge. It's the way in which it is done. It's like saying, you know, putting on your shoes is not the problem you have that is causing the heel to break down. It's the way you put them on. If you just put them on a different way, it won't happen.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Allan, I want to get back to the way that it's done being the problem. And before I do that, you talk about Savory Institute being really the only and the most forward-thinking form of tackling this problem, and through holistic land management. And I'm curious, how is the holistic land management and the practices you teach through Savory different than like rotational grazing or holistic grazing that other people and other farmers and gardeners use?
Well, first, we're not doing land planning, land management. That's a misnomer. We're teaching people how to manage their lives. And if they're in agriculture and if livestock are required, we teach them how to run the livestock. That I explained in the TED Talk. So there's that. But when I went to Australia for a book signing, after the first edition of my textbook came out, I was met by over 300 Australians from every state except Tasmania. And they had come with tremendous success stories. And what I liked was the number of them that thanked me, not for saving their farm or anything else. They just said, thank you, Allan, for saving our family. It's about managing your family. So you, Natalie, and everybody listening should be managing your own life, holistically in your own home, even if you're in an employed job. It is not about land management. That is just a Savory Institute strategy, because when we start tackling this problem on a global scale through policies by governments, which we have to do or watch this failure of civilization, when we do begin to do that, the biggest return to humans will come from the vast area of the world that is turning to desert so rapidly. Because even if you stop all fossil fuel use tomorrow, do all the things people want, desertification will ensure that climate change continues. Remember, more than 20 civilizations had failed before we discovered and used fossil fuels. And they failed for the exact same reason: loss of biodiversity, leading to habitat destruction, land destruction. So Savory Institute, for very good reason, has that strategy. But if you look at what we are doing, we're doing that to try to get the holistic framework into global consciousness to save civilization, no matter where you are in the world, because no country can be an island to itself today. I mean, right now I'm sitting in Florida talking to you, and there's a cloud of dust from the Sahara in Africa that's, I think they said something like 2,000 kilometers or wide. Hell, that's coming from desertification. That's not natural.
So tell us how I manage my family and how we manage our land is connected to how we work through policy and how we're going to change the world.
Okay, let me do it this way. Well, let me try and do it the way I explained it at COP26 simply. I said, I've been invited here. I was one of 3 people invited in a small sideshow to talk about regenerative agriculture and climate change. And I said, I don't intend to do so because I know so little about agriculture, carbon, any of these things. There are thousands of people more qualified than me to talk about those. What I'm going to do is talk about the cause of the problem. Because if we don't solve that, we're dead. That's unquestionable. That's unarguable. Right? So what is the cause of the problem? And then I talked about how people there would be talking ultimately about management, how the bulk of the world's scientists have now acknowledged that humans are causing climate change. Now, logically, people are logical, or can be logical. You cannot have 2 causes of a problem. You can have many causes, things exacerbating a problem, but only one root cause. So if humans are causing climate change, then fossil fuels are not causing it, livestock is not causing it, corporate greed is not causing it, all the things we're blaming are not causing it. If humans are causing it, it's how we manage resources, which has come around to what I started to realize in the 1950s and to investigate. All right, so that's what's causing it. And then I said, now, people are demanding that governments do something about this. So they're demanding that presidents, prime ministers, etc., do something. They have no idea what to do because they're getting conflicting advice from the experts. And I said, take the COP conferences on climate change. We're at COP26. I don't care if you go to COP 100. You'll still see the same chaos coming out of these conferences. And the reason is because some of the people at the conference will be arguing for the production of food by farmers based on the biological sciences, mostly ecology. Some people will be arguing for the production of electricity from geothermal, nuclear, wind, solar, etc. Other people on the other side, and there will be the majority, particularly with agriculture, will be arguing for corporate production of cheap food using technology and chemistry. And then you'll have the bulk of 9 billion people or whatever we are in the world who are apathetic. They just want to be entertained, watch TV and look at their cell phones. So they support the majority. So any leader of any country has no idea what to do. Now, I said all of those are talking about production. If you stop producing electricity or you stop producing food, it stops. It doesn't carry on. It's not self-organizing. It's not complex. Nothing we produce is complex. It's complicated. I don't know how to produce a computer. I don't know how to produce a watch. It's too complicated for me, but it's not complex as complexity is defined. So if everything we produce is not the problem, because it's not management, we're not managing it, then where is the problem coming from? And it's coming from the 3 things that you, Natalie, are managing, the same as the president of any country is managing, the same 3 things. Humans, institutions at scale, the economy, and nature to produce all the things we produce. All humans only manage 3 things. And the 3 things you manage and governments manage, you cannot isolate them. With the things you can produce milk or wine, you can produce cell phones or bombs, you can produce dresses or music, art or literature, When it comes to what you manage, you can't choose. Even you and I and everybody listening has no choice. As you try to manage your family, you have to manage your finances. If you don't, parents end up committing suicide because they can't support the children. And then you're managing nature to produce something, whether you're working or factory or you're a farmer, and everything comes from nature and goes back to nature. It is that simple. Now that managing the three things we're managing, if you want to know why, for instance, you have a health problem, that's why you have an organization that's concerned about health and soil, what would happen? Remember, a political party in any country, whether it's a dictatorship or not, it's a political party. If it's a democracy, it'll be a political party that's in power. The first thing a political party has to do as an organization is the same as a human. It has to finance itself. So the first priority of that party is to finance itself. Second priority is to gain support of people, etc. Its third priority is to remain in power at all cost. Its fourth priority is concern with the health of the citizens. Now, why do I say that? You could say, well, the health of the citizens is their first priority. No, it's not. You could say health of the citizens is its second priority to gain support. No, it's not. Let me give you a practical example. I'm talking from the United States at the moment. Because of faulty agricultural policy, the way it's developed, because political parties have to stay in power, they have to produce cheap food. If they don't produce lots of cheap food, you get riots and overthrows and revolutions. They know that. Every political party knows that. So if you're heading the United States government, whatever party, and you have to produce plenty of cheap, abundant food, right? That's clear. That's what your aim is there. Now, the policy that they do to do that is producing, amongst other things, something like 300,000 deaths a year that are obesity related. That's greater than the annual deaths of the United States in 2 world wars. Now, that's happening, but it's keeping profits up, it's keeping stock markets up, it's cheap food, it's keeping a government in power. Now, if they were producing 300 or even 100 or even 50,000 people dying of starvation every year, you'd have riots in every city and the government would be overthrown. So what would you do if you were a president? You would do exactly what they're all doing. Now that's what the Savory Institute deals with at scale, is how to solve that, how to get policies developed in the interests of citizens, not of political parties, not of corporations, not of universities, environmental organizations, farmers' organizations. They're all organizations. Their first priority is to finance themselves, get support, stay in power, market share. The third or fourth priority is citizen health. So unless your organization wakes up to this, you will live out your life doing good, feeling good, doing everything you can to get healthier food, but it ain't going to happen unless you address the root cause.
Do you think the disconnection about addressing the root cause is a failure of intellect or consciousness?
Neither. Just we didn't discover it. Let me use an example. For thousands of years, humans couldn't fly. We dreamt of flying. Thousands of men died trying. Do you think we couldn't fly because of lack of consciousness or intellect? No. We hadn't discovered how to fly. In 1983, we discovered the cause of what I'm talking about. It was only discovered then. I talked about the cause very briefly in the TED Talk. I talked about one of the discoveries, and in the COP talk, that the very short one I've just mentioned in my textbook, I talk of the second. There were two things we had to discover And we discovered those by 1983 when I wrote the first edition of the textbook. And the textbook is holistic management, not holistic land management.
I love how the Savory Institute is about holistic management. And you have very powerful questions that you elicit with people to help them have a better understanding of where they are and how they're going to get the results that they're going after. And I was wondering if you could share those questions with us.
Okay, I wouldn't do them as questions, as perhaps try to explain it very carefully. Now, here I'm on thin ice. Let me use an analogy. If you had never ever seen a bicycle and I was describing a bicycle to you, and it's on narrow wheels and you pedal like hell and you keep balanced and you can steer it, you would say, this man's insane, this man's crazy. And the more I explained, the more stupid you would think I was, etc. If we had a bicycle, because it's 100% practical, you'd probably ride it in 30 minutes. It's the same with managing holistically. It's not theory. Lots of people say, I've got theory. I haven't got any theory. I worked on Smuts's theory. It's 100% practical. So if you and I and anybody in the audience was together, just doing it around the kitchen table, just working together and saying, let's start helping you manage your family holistically, you would just say, oh my God, this is common sense. You would get it immediately. So I risk it when I explain, but let me try. You and everybody, and governments are the same, we humans, this is one of the things we discovered in '83. You believe that we make decisions in thousands of different ways. We develop policies in hundreds of different ways. That's a false belief. What we discovered was all humans do it exactly the same, have done for 1 million years. It's genetic. It's tool-using animals. So again, tell me if I'm wrong, but haven't you made every conscious decision in your life to meet a need you had, to meet a desire you had, or to solve a problem you had?
Yes. Look like
So
most
was every human, so you are causing the problem. There you are. Why? Because the world is not linear, not simple, not mechanical. It is holistic. It is a biosphere. It is billions and billions and billions of organisms interacting, and Smuts and earlier people, Humboldt, worked that out and gave us a theory of how you are a whole human being, but you're actually a colony of cells. And most of the cells in you are actually microorganisms. But they're you. But why are you full of slime and microorganisms and biome environment in your gut? That's you. If you're emotionally upset, you don't feel it in your head, you feel it in your body. Okay, and the world is like that. It's complex. So in that world, you cannot have these be the reason and the context for your decisions. They will always be the reason for your decisions. I don't think we'll ever change that. We don't want to change that. In Savory Institute, we don't do anything to change that. We encourage people to meet their needs, their desires, and solve their problems, and have those as the reasons for their decisions. But we teach them how to have a different context. That cannot be the context for the decision. So we simply teach you to sit, if I was sitting with you by the kitchen table, I would just simply say, Natalie, what is your family? Is it you? Who's your partner? Have you got children? Who makes the management decisions in your family? Let's get them around the table. Is there any old crusty bugger that's got veto power over your management decisions? Yes, my father or whatever. All right, get him around the kitchen table with us. And then we would just talk about, how do you want your life to be? Well, I want to live a physically secure life, emotionally secure. I want freedom to pursue my own religion. I want blah, 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 blah. What would you rather die than not live like that? Deep stuff. And when we've got that, we'd say, well, look, every bit of food, everything you use comes from the environment, goes back to the environment. how's the environment that is supporting you? That's your life-supporting environment. As everything comes from that and goes back to that, how's that going to have to be 500 years from now from your great-great-great-grandchildren to be having a life like you want? And you'll start describing clean, drinkable water, not like Canada, America, and other countries have got, where you pay more for a bottle of drinking water than you do for a gallon of gas for your car. And that's just ridiculous. Every farmer should be drinking the water coming off the land. Every factory owner should be drinking the water in the river below the factory. So we describe the environment as it has to be if we are to survive. And then we'll talk about behavior, because you trade and so on. And then that is what we call a holistic context. And now I would say, now begin just making your decisions as you meet your needs, desires, make them in that context. And we'll give you some help in learning how to do that. And if it was at a government scale, it'd be the same thing, just a different scale.
So ultimately, you're connecting people with nature and their relationship with nature.
Well, ultimately, I'm doing what all humans have tried to do for 1 million years. Same as all tool-using animals. You're trying to manage your life in your life-supporting environment. That's where science comes from. That's where everything comes from.
So why are we failing so prolifically?
Because, like, we didn't know how to fly. We didn't know what was causing it.
How are we going?
We didn't know that the world was that complex and that you couldn't make all decisions, especially at policy, to produce cheap food without consequences, unintended consequences. So you look at any policy you like and you'll see the same thing. I'll talk about America because it's easiest to being here. They have a policy on noxious weeds, invasive weeds, that are non-native. These are bureaucratic terms. There's no science behind them. They're not scientific terms. They're bureaucratic terms. They've set a date. And if you're a plant or an insect or anything, and you were blown over from Africa by the winds and got here, or you arrived on the seashore floating on a coconut or whatever, before a certain date, you're native. If you arrived a day later, you're non-native. You didn't get a green card. And now we have to kill you at all cost. And so in this country, they spend over $1 billion every year since I've been here, poisoning, killing, eradicating non-native plants that don't exist. There are none on this planet yet. They've poisoned the environment, poisoned the rivers, bankrupted the farmers, destroyed whole small towns and villages failing, and they just keep doing it because they don't know any better. Now take COVID. COVID was a serious pandemic, virus outbreak, but I read that in 4 months it did more global damage economically than World War II did in 4 years when I was growing up. Now, just use your common sense. No virus can ever do that amount of global economic damage. That's impossible. The only thing that can do that is how the governments develop their policies to deal with it. Same thing. Take the war on terror, they call it in America. It spread terror. Take the war on drugs. It spread drugs. It spread drug use. It spread violence to gangs in America, in South America. It spread violence to Africa and to Europe. It doesn't matter which you look at it. And when I was training 2,000 fellow scientists, resource managers, university professors, etc., which I was commissioned to do by the USDA Soil Conservation Service in 1980s. When I was doing that, they concluded, not me, when they were working with the holistic framework, they concluded, and I can still quote it verbatim because it's in my textbook, has been all these years, and they said, we now recognize that unsound resource management is universal in the United States. It's universal in every country. So there's no mystery to us having this discussion about health. Now, we knew that in 1983.
How do we move forward from here?
I there's two known ways. Sorry, there's one known way, and there's a way I'm suggesting. The only known way, if you read the research and you read history, is to have organizations like yours gradually spreading the awareness, and as we're doing at Savory Institute, spreading the awareness about the importance of grasslands, savannas, desertification, as I explained earlier, for the reasons I explained. And so you've got all of that going on. You've got over 600 organizations now preaching regenerative agriculture. And that sounds great, but they represent, I would guess, 1, 2, 3% of 9 billion people. We're preaching to a very small choir. And as I explained earlier, governments have to produce cheap, abundant food. So this very small choir isn't even at the policy table. And according to the research of people like Lord Ashby and others who've studied how new knowledge gets into societies, that'll take anywhere up to 200 years to get into institutions changing. But then you're only asking them to change practices. Nobody's asking them to change how they develop policy. There's only basically me asking for that, and a very few people who support me. So that's the only known way of change. And that's why at my age, 90, I'm more worried than I've ever been about the future of humanity. Because in my 70 years of working on this, I've made about 1 millimeter of progress. So I'm very worried. And so that's why at COP26, I thought about it deeply and thought, look, I'm only going to talk about the cause of this problem, and I never, ever criticize without offering a solution. That's a policy I hold myself to. And so let me offer a way forward. And I made a suggestion that let's try something that's never, ever been done before, because I think the downside is zero. It'll cost us almost nothing, cause no delays. And the upside, if it works, you won't be able to put a price to it. It'll save billions of lives and suffering the world can't even imagine as cities begin to fail when we eventually don't produce enough food in our destroyed environment. So I made a suggestion there, and that was just that we get one country, state, sovereign state, whatever it is, you've got to have one under a central authority, a political party, because that's where management at scale takes place. Just carry on as normal. Don't change anything because politicians have to stay in power. But get that leader of that party, state, whatever it is, to just be a statesman and say, let's try something on the side and just have our experts and citizens together, not as institutions, not as a political party, bring in the opposition. Let us just see if we can develop agricultural policy in the interests of the citizens. And your exact same people, your exact same experts, I promise you, produce totally different results. Because the priority now becomes citizen interest and not the interests of keeping institutions in power, be they universities or farming organizations.
And how is that
So
received?
that's my suggestion. It's interesting. Of all the things I've ever put out, it's the only one that I haven't had a single word of criticism. On internet, social media, not a word of criticism. I've had a few hundred or thousand people say, good idea. I've had nobody prepared to act.
No one
I
prepared.
can't explain that public apathy to you any more than you can probably explain it.
And why is there so much pushback against you, Alan? Why you said that right at the beginning that people say that it's just snake oil. You're full of snake oil. So what does that mean to you when you say that?
Well, I let it run off my back because it's not about me or my ego or anything, but I'm sad for humanity because it's not snake oil, it's just plain science. I can't get a single scientist, Nobel laureate or any other to tell me where I'm wrong. And I invite them to. I invite anybody on this podcast, please tear me apart. Tell me where I'm wrong. I don't have a monopoly on being right. I've screwed up so much in my life, and I've learned from those mistakes. So that's the situation we face. I'm just turning that off. I see there's a reflection on my glasses that may worry people. There's a good reason why there's been such opposition, not from people so much as just from institutions, and that is because institutions are complex, they take on a life of their own, and they defend the prevailing thinking of the society in which they're formed. And so we know this well from research. And so when you get two types of discovery, and it took us a long time to understand this, you get the normal type of discovery where it's new. Everybody knows it's new. Your organizations, your governments know it's new. Universities know it's new. It's totally new, blah, blah, blah. It's exciting. It's controversial. There are people who say it's nonsense. There are people who say, no, it doesn't make sense. And so we use the scientific method. We investigate in every way we can, and we confirm it or reject it, and we move on. If we reject it, it's forgotten. It was a great idea, but it didn't work. We couldn't confirm it. And if we move on, we give awards and clap and applaud and Nobel Prizes, etc. Now, periodically in history, and very rarely, there's been a different type of discovery. And that is, something is discovered that ordinary people can see, this is new, this is interesting. They may be controversial. Some will say, no, it's nonsense. Some will say, no, it makes sense, and investigate it. But institutions, all of them, farmers' organizations, environmental organizations, universities, governments, they don't think it's new. They know it is wrong because it goes against thousands of years of human belief. And you and I have really discussed two there. We've touched on them in this talk. You talked about the TED Talk. In the TED Talk, that 20-minute talk, I point out how in the 1960s, I realized, oh my God, we are trying to stop biodiversity loss in Africa, in our seasonal rainfall environment, all our long 8 dry months of no rain, etc. And we're trying to do it as scientists using the only tools scientists have. Fire, we can burn the grass, burn the land. We were all doing that. We were taught to do it. Well, that wasn't working. It exposed the soil. It led to droughts and floods and desertification. Well, what other tools did we have? Well, we had technology, chemicals, bulldozers, axes, hose. Well, it's a biological problem. How can you solve it with technology? The answer was we couldn't. It was getting worse and worse and worse. Was there anything else? Well, yes, we could rest the land, rewild it, make national parks. Well, hell, that's where I began observing the biodiversity loss, was where we were setting land aside as future national parks. Was there anything else humans could do? No, nothing. Nothing known in any branch of science, physics, nothing, no Nobel laureates, nobody in the world had any other tool. And we're a tool-using animal. And it was then that I realized, oh my God, only animals can do this. We have to use livestock. That's why I said in the TED Talk, I had to do the unthinkable. And then I showed the results, and we've confirmed those results. We've done international trials, we've written textbooks, there are papers written. It's got boring. We've proved it so often. And to this day, institutions, environmental organizations, farmers' organizations, ranching organizations still don't support us.
And why is that?
Because they believe livestock caused desertification. That's written in ancient religious texts. It's centuries ago, over 10,000 years ago, blaming the shepherds for their sheep causing the desert sands that were overwhelming the biblical cities. That became a scientific truth. That became taught by every university in the world, including one I went to. That's what I was taught. There are thousands of PhD peer-reviewed papers. Not one of them does anything except basically blame livestock. Not one of them defines overgrazing because they knew what it was, too many animals. So we had this certain knowledge in our institutions. So that's why when in the 1960s I first said and then proved in international trials that we could reverse desertification using greatly increased livestock, that was like me throwing a pork chop in the synagogue. It caused a furore that hasn't ended.
And how, Alan, how do we push back?
You
And
don't push back. You don't, because if you push back, it'll take another 100, 200 years. Don't push back. Just start talking about the cause. It was discovered, published in 1983, but nobody talks about it because the cause was how we make our management actions through the decision making we use that you and I have just talked about. So just talk about that. When we talk about that, nobody argues. Nobody fights. I've even had groups shouting at me, telling me it's impossible to have agreement in their community. There's been so much violence. And I've said, well, just work with me for an hour. And I've not talked about coming together, hearing people meaningfully, meeting people where they are, using any woke jargon, nothing like that. I've used no known techniques of bringing people together. I've just got them sitting around and said, how do you all want your lives to be? It's exactly the same. I haven't met anybody who doesn't want more prosperity, more stable life, more physical security, more abundant, clean, healthy food. Every human wants the same thing. But we never talk about that. We talk about how to produce the food and get into fighting and arguing.
so, how do we bring people together based on those values?
No, you don't talk about values. If you talk about people's values, you get a string of values that are meaningless. You talk about how do you want your life to be. It's a new concept. It's not in any branch of science, religion, or philosophy. It's what we call a holistic context. And when we develop that with any group of people, you find tremendous unity.
And how do we bring that into policy?
Well, that's where you begin. I mean, if you had to develop policy, let's say on agriculture, you bring the institutions together because it can only be done through institutions. But then there you talk to them about the problems of institutions, defending the thinking of the day, etc. And you say, you've been sent here by your institutions, but now we're going to treat you as humans. No institution is a human. They don't act like humans. Institutions are incapable of common sense virtually, incapable of empathy, incapable of rapid change, acceptance of new knowledge, like we've just talked about. Institutions are not people. The moment we hang the first company for poisoning people, then I'll think institutions are like people. They're not. They are legal entities. But we have to have them and we have to manage through them. Now many people don't understand that institutions are complex, therefore they are what we are managing and we have to finance them, etc. And so I get frustrated trying to explain that to people because they're just not aware of it. And so one case I had recently talking to two young men, well educated, came from wealthy families, good education, and they'd been observing me all their lives back in my own country, and they said, Allan, you're doing something wrong. Your message, what you say is so clear, so simple, and yet we've watched you all our lives facing terrible opposition and attempts to destroy your work. You are doing something wrong. And I said, yes, I must be doing something wrong, as you say. And I said, I've had many people tell me I'm doing it wrong, but I've had nobody tell me how to do it right. And I said, what about you guys? How are you doing? And they said, well, what do you mean? We don't understand you. I said, well, how are you doing? We don't understand you. I said, well, you look like Christians, are you? And they said, yes. And I said, all right, what did your founder have to say? Didn't he just talk about love and caring? Isn't that simple? And they said, yes. And I said, for 2,000 years, millions and millions and millions of families and people have been capable of love and caring for each other. What happened when you took it to scale and developed churches? You've had over 2,000 Christian churches. They've been fighting each other, going to war, protecting paedophile priests. The Holocaust was carried out by Christians. I said, how are you guys doing? That's not what your founder said. So don't tell me I'm doing it wrong. When we have new knowledge, it's very difficult, particularly when you deal with institutions. And at least we've found a peaceful, harmonious, easy way to do it, if we can just get people to do it. And that means just develop policy holistically in the interests of the citizens, not of institutions. You could do that in Canada. You could be the first country in the world to do it. Just needs enough mothers and caring people to talk to your Prime Minister and say, hey, doesn't this make sense? Let's at least investigate it. So if you're really concerned about health and soil, I would get more concerned about the cause of the problem. Because if you deal with the cause of the problem, you've got a real possibility within 3, 4, 5 years, you'll be seeing dramatic change in clean, nutritious food, health, everything, with everybody in support of it, including your institutions. If you keep just hanging your head and trying to convince the public, good luck to you. If you achieve anything under a century, you'll be the first one in history to do that.
It's so curious, Allan, because some people think that changing policy will create changes, which is what I'm hearing from you. And then other people think helping educate consumers to have different demands of what they want will lead to change. And what are your thoughts about that?
I'll just be repeating myself. Those people are right. I said it's the only known way of change is to just keep educating, enlightening people till they demand change. And Lord Ashby wrote about that. He said institutions do not change, no matter how many trillions of dollars are lost, no matter how many millions of lives are lost, no matter how much fact data is produced, institutions do not change until society changes. So we know that. So those people are right. And I'm saying they're right. I'm just telling them it takes a very, very, very long time. And all of them, including 600 odd branches of regenerative agriculture, are demanding and talking and trying to convince people to produce food through farmers based on the biological sciences. They're not talking about the management of the complexity to produce that food. So they may be successful in 100 years after I'm gone in getting governments to bring that into policy. And the first thing that will happen is you'll have thousands of deaths and the government will be overthrown. So I'm saying, why don't we just try something new, which doesn't take any risk, costs nothing, try it. So I'm up against a mass of people in the world who are determined to go the only known way, despite all the science, all the history telling them it'll take a very long time, and then they're only asking to change the way of producing food. And I'm against that with a few supporters and friends at Savory Institute, saying, why don't we just take one country, internationally observe it, set it aside, at the worst, if it's a complete failure, we'll waste a year, we'll waste $1 or $2 million and a year. No politician will be found at fault. No politician will lose power. Nothing. That's the worst that could happen. Now, if, and there's a 90% chance I'm right, plus, if it's successful, every leader in the world will know what to do. And you'll start a domino effect because we're not stupid. We're not deliberately trying to destroy ourselves. There were two things we'd not discovered till 1983. And then they were suppressed by institutions. And
And
it's
those
ordinary people who've kept them alive.
and those two things that were discovered are
That you cannot reverse biodiversity loss on the global scale. In other words, right across North Africa, from down Canada to South America, across North Africa up into China, down to India, far larger than the Bolivian Amazon forest, far larger than the whole of Europe. You cannot do that with fire and technology or rewilding the land. You have no option but livestock and the holistic planned grazing process, which we've never had fail. We've had thousands of people fail to do it, but never had anybody do that planning process and fail. Right, so that's one of the discoveries. The other one was that where all humans think we develop policies and make decisions in thousands of different ways, no, we don't. We all do it identically, and it's causing the problem.
and
Very simple discoveries, not
yeah,
scientific discoveries, just management discoveries.
those are powerful, Alan. And if you had a country to work with, how long before they would see change?
They would see change within the first year, absolutely guaranteed, because we've done that time and time and time again. And in attitude, you'd see change within probably 6 months. I did work with 35 members of parliament in my own country. I've mentioned that in the textbook. These were 35 members of parliament coming from two political parties that made Republicans and Democrats in America look like friendly kids playing in a sandpit. They were actually killing each other. And I was able to do that because of my past history in the country of being one of the leaders of the political parties during the war. And the people appealed to me not to talk about agriculture or land because it would get violent. And I said, don't worry about what I'm going to talk to them about. And with 35 members of parliament, there was a hostile attitude in the room, so I didn't. I just said to them, you guys are lawmakers, you members of parliament, you pass the laws. How do you and your government develop policy? Whichever party gets into power, how do you develop policy? They had no idea. So I explained it to them. And I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't been leader of a political party, president of one. So I explained that to them. And I said, that incidentally is what's causing the problems. There's a different way of doing it. Let me talk to you about it. And I didn't talk about land or anything. I just talked about policy. And then I said, the first thing we need is to know what every citizen wants. So let's develop that. And when we got a national holistic context, which was easy to do, I had one drafted, I just read it out to them, change anything you wanted to. One woman wanted to change a word. And they said, no, that's what every citizen wants. Healthier life, prosperity, stability, freedom to pursue their own religion, clean running rivers, nutritious food. Every citizen wants that. The whole atmosphere changed. And I said, now, why don't we look at land and agriculture? And suddenly it was just 35 Zimbabweans working together, not two political parties. And by the end of the workshop, we had the policy basis that the world dreams of. There'd be no regenerative agriculture, no organic agriculture. Why? Because all food would be clean, healthy, nutritious, growing on regenerating soil, and you could drink river water again. And every bit of knowledge we needed was in the room. That could be repeated in Canada or any country.
And why isn't that being repeated?
Because people do what you're saying. They keep arguing and saying, no, we've got to educate, we've got to convince, we've got to change our consciousness, we've got to take a more holistic atmosphere, we've got to listen to Indigenous people. I listen to this stuff going on all the time. I've been listening to it for over 50 years. And when you suggest a common sense, simple way forward just to see what could happen, you get apathy, you get no criticism. So you can explain that probably better than I can.
Alan, what keeps you up at night? And what do you worry about most?
Well, what I worry about is what we're talking about. There's, this destruction of our human habitat. It's greater danger than all wars ever fought. Can you think of a greater danger than continuing to destroy biodiversity that the whole biosphere is dependent on? I mean, we don't have an outside enemy doing this. We're doing it for profit. And we're doing it so that we can keep political parties in power with cheap, inexpensive food, poisoning people. As I said, in the United States, 300,000 a year dying of health issues for profit. And if just 50,000 died of starvation, you'd have riots. There you've got your explanation. Everybody's apathetic as long as the stock market's up, as long as I'm going to get my pension, as long as somebody's making profit. I don't care how many people die. But let me get hungry and you'll have a riot. You and I are part of it.
And what gives you,
Very pensive.
pardon me?
You look very pensive.
Pensive, that's a big word. I'm so curious. Man, there's so many questions, and I know we've been on already for a long time because I think so much information is buried and so much information is just unknown. And you're right, I believe that people do the best they can with what they know, with where they're at, and we don't know what we don't know, right? We really don't know what we don't know.
Yeah, but now you do know something.
Yeah.
And what will you do?
Absolutely. Keep having conversations. So for the person who does know, who is discovering there are ways, what can an individual do?
What an individual can do is exactly what I did 60 years ago. I was an individual. I saw the problem and I became determined to do something about it because I cared about my country. I cared about future generations. I cared about wildlife. I describe it in my memoir. I was sitting on the banks of a river in my country and there'd been rain upriver and the river came down in flood, muddy water, a couple of dead donkeys floated by, trees floated by. And I was on my own, and men don't cry, or they didn't in those years. And I just sat crying on the bank of the river. That's my country being destroyed. And who's doing it? We're doing it ourselves, no foreign enemy. And I thought to myself, well, I was 20 years at war. Why am I in the army? Why am I killing my fellow countrymen? Why am I doing all this when we're destroying our own country? None of that is destroying it. And I became just determined to do something about it. So any person listening, if they become determined to do something, that's all that's required. Then they'll talk to others, they'll get a small group together, and they'll, if need be, have a look at that suggestion I made at COP26. Ring your Prime Minister, ask to see him and say, look, this makes sense. Why don't we try this? Why don't you talk to Savory? That's all it takes. He doesn't know what to do. He'd probably talk. Every time I talk to any leader, it makes sense to them. What I can't do is personally get to them because they have a bureaucracy under them that I can't get through, and it looks self-serving. If you say this makes sense, why don't you talk to him? He will. If I say, why don't you talk to me? What's in it? What's your motive? That's common knowledge that people look self-serving if they approach you. But if somebody else does, a third party, it works.
And what gives you the most hope today?
Well, just that we're talking and you're helping to spread the word, because a point I make at many podcasts, is people who discover new ideas aren't the leaders. They're a very different type of person, and they're not the leaders. The leaders in society are the people who get the knowledge into communities. That's the freelance writers, the artists, the filmmakers, etc. Nowadays, the podcasters, etc. So you're doing what you can, which is to get the knowledge into society. So if you are successful in getting over to 10 people in your country that, hey, there's a solution to this problem, hey, it's very harmonious. It pulls people together. It stops us blaming each other. We're all blaming the wrong things. Why don't we investigate this? If they cared enough, they'd come down to Florida and come see me. Talk about it. And we can. Okay, what could be done about it? And produce a plan to do something about it. It's not difficult.
Yeah. Allan, what's a question that you wish people would ask you that's not often asked?
Well, I've been asked these questions over and over again. My question to you and all your people who listen is, why are you so apathetic? I think it's my questions that need to be answered. Why, when this has been known for 3 years, it's on internet, it's on YouTube, why are you so apathetic? Don't you care about your family? Don't you care about your country? Are you prepared to go to war for your country, but you're not prepared to talk to your political leaders about just trying a new idea? Don't tell me you care. You're apathetic. I would just be asking these questions. In my memoir, which I said earlier, it's named, Unsavory, and then it's a story of how these concepts developed from that unique situation. You'll see that I cared enough, and so, yes, I was very demanding. And I clashed with generals, I clashed with politicians, I clashed with scientists, but I would not give up because they couldn't tell me where I was wrong. And through that, as more and more of us worked on it, we broke through and discovered what was causing the problem. But it only happened because I cared enough. So if you have 10, 5 or 3 listeners who care enough, they'll do what's needed. If they don't care enough, they'll say, oh, that was an interesting podcast, and carry on knitting.
What's one experience in your life that really shaped you into who you are today?
I mentioned them in the memoir. I've had several. I've had shocks. Some of them my biggest mistakes from which I learned, oh my God, I'm wrong. I mentioned terrible shocks I got as a school kid that made me realize that, oh my God, you can't let your ego stand in the way. Either you're all about your ego or you're all about your team. And so I describe these moments in my life that led to me being what I was. And I was just a typical young boy growing up in Africa in those days, in a very young country. Don't forget, my country was only, I think, 13 years old when I was born.
One of the things I appreciate about you, Allan, is how you were able to just notice that you're getting something wrong. And I think that's hard sometimes, especially when we have such faith in our government, faith in policy, faith in the people who are our leaders and looking after us. And to pause and think that they might not be making the decisions that would give us our best life in health and in the food that we eat and all the things. How do we how did you have the grace for yourself when you noticed that you were wrong?
I don't know the answer to that. I do know my friends, my family helped me keep honest. I'm like any human. I had the temptations to claim validity for an idea or whatever. And I realized, no, but if I do that, my family know that I'm lying. My friends know. So having family and friends helped me keep me honest. and your self-esteem. And in the end, I decided, and I can't explain it except it's how you're brought up and the experiences you go through. In the end, I decided it doesn't matter what the world thinks. What matters is my own self-esteem. And I just couldn't bring myself to do things I knew were wrong. And so that's where I started rebelling, even as an army officer, and opposing the generals. Because I said, I'm not prepared to lead men, and I'm going to oppose you, generals, because I believe you're mishandling this war. And I'm not going to lead men to their deaths. And so then I became a non-person in the army, and then they bowed mouthed me and everything. And there were times when I had big billboards in the capital city, try Savory for treason. I said, yeah, please do. It'll give me an opportunity in the courts to say what I'm saying and hear what the government has to say. Because everything was being suppressed. We had secret censorship. And so, again, I was opposing, but I wasn't the only one opposing it. There were others, but we were small. We were about a third of the voting population. One thing I did learn, and why I like talking to podcasters like yourself and others and getting to families and so on, I did learn that change, like we're talking about, takes moral courage. So to go and talk to your Prime Minister, that's daunting to a lot of people. It takes moral courage. And I had to go through 20 years of war in Rhodesia to learn, because of small population, knowing the situation, knowing the people, that men were committing great acts of physical courage and bravery, that if you knew the men and you knew the situation, were actually cover-ups for moral cowardice. And I realized that women had far more moral courage than men. Obviously, generalizations are not all true, but by and large, when women said, we care about our children, they meant it. If you watched their behavior, they showed it. And now, if you talk to men, and I'm a man, and I know exactly how we think, you talk to us, we would say, well, our families and our children mean everything to us. But if you watched our behavior and watched us in the coffee shop, in the bar and everything, you realize, no, peer approval, approval of our mates, medals on our chests, gongs, awards, recognition from our mates. This peer pressure is great amongst men. And so you would see men committing great acts of physical courage, admirable acts. But actually, they shouldn't have been doing what they should have been were doing. They should have said no. That took moral courage, and they didn't have it. So it took me 20 years of war in a small country to see that. So I think there's more hope in women and families and mothers beginning to demand action than there is in men. If you look, what I observed in war, I saw physical courage as cover-ups for moral cowardice. And I experienced it there, that most of the people that stood up and spoke were the women. And the men would duck their heads and duck and dive. And
Yeah, there's so much vulnerability there. Well, what's inspiring, Allan, is that I think a lot of people don't understand the power of the Savory Institute and the model of holistic management. And a lot of people have an understanding that it's about holistic land management. And you've done such an eloquent dive into how it's so much more, and that the holistic land management is just a vehicle of communication, a vehicle of touching people's lives. And it's really about holistic management, and it brings a lot of hope into where we are
gives
today.
great hope, more hope than we ever could have had in history. Because, as I say, now we do know why it is that we so struggle and have for thousands of years to manage our families, our lives, our economy, whether it was bartering and then later more sophisticated economies, and nature from which we produced all our food. Now, we've never understood why that's destroyed civilizations throughout history. Uh, People talk about sustainable agriculture, and many years ago I did a video on saying that wasn't the problem. The problem was sustaining civilization. I said throughout history, we've abandoned our cities when we couldn't feed them. And they've, I'm sure, been abandoned with a lot of violence. But we went back to sustaining our families in small communities as nomadic pastoralists or small subsistence farmers or whatever. Our difficulty is, how do we sustain cities? And over half the world's population now lives in cities. We can't abandon them again and just go back to sustaining agriculture in small communities, etc. So we have to solve the problem, and I'm just thrilled that in my lifetime we discovered how to do that very simply, very amicably, to stop all the blaming, because the things we're blaming are wrong, so we're wrong to be blaming each other. The only thing you'll hear me blaming is the behavior of institutions, because the people in them, they can't stop that. That's because institutions are not human. I blame institutions, or I criticize institutions, but I try my best not to criticize the people, because both of them are doing the best. I mean, I know there are evil people. I've had to deal with many, but most people are not like that. And so when it's happening to all of us, then it's got to be some reason, and we discovered that. So I'm very hopeful if somebody like you and other podcasters can get through to enough people who care and let us try something new. Because if not, we're back to exactly what you were doing, and exactly what you said, and exactly what millions of good people are doing. That's trying to convince governments to change the way we produce food. But that's not going to solve the problem. I would just keep repeating, I don't know how to put it more simply in English.
We need to change the questions we ask and how we make decisions and connect with.
You'll never change how you make decisions. It's how you then decide to act in management. In other words, you and I and our decisions, when you meet a need, a desire, or you solve a problem, what you will do is you will have to use some tool, because you can't even drink milk unless you go to a cow and suck with your mouth, unless you use a cup, a mug, some tool. We're a tool-using animal. And how you will make the decision to meet your need, desire, influence, act on your environment, whatever, you will always do it the same way. You'll do it through one or more of many factors. You'll listen to friends, you'll listen to expert advice, consultants, laws, regulations, cost, cash flow, effectiveness, profitability, cultural norms, peer compromise, peer pressure, fear, and you'll make your decision. And you'll never change that. And we don't want you to change that. But when you are about to make that decision, we just teach you how to check and see, is it in line with how I really want my life to be, and how to adjust it. And if it's not in line, don't do it. Just think again. And literally, people can learn to do that in a day or two. The only thing that blocks learning is our egos and what we know. Ignorance, I've never found block learning.
I'm so curious to see where this takes you, where it takes us.
Well, it's not going to take me far because of my age. I'm in the departure lounge. So when I
Right.
buy anything today and they tell me it's got a 5-year guarantee, I say, thank you, that's a lifetime guarantee. So it's not going to take me. This is not about me. My anxiety is in my last few years before they call my flight, is to try to get somebody in the world to take this seriously.
Yeah, I want to help you do that. I'm going to do everything I can to help you do that. I don't know what will or won't come of that, Ellen, but I'm going to. I'm gonna,
I'm sure you'll do your best, and I hope
yeah.
you're successful because I haven't been very successful.
Well, yeah,
As those guys said, I'm doing something wrong.
what I do know is I'm so grateful for your courage and your humility and your
Uh,
curiosity.
You can
And
do the same. Come on, Natalie, you can do the same.
yes, we all can though, and that's the light that you shine though, Alan, right?
Yeah,
That is you literally hold up the candle for people to see what's possible.
yeah,
And that is how lives are changed. That's how systems are changed. That's how policy is changed.
yeah.
And it would just, I mean, it would be my wish that you can see that happen on a larger scale while you're still in the flesh. And if not, then may you continue to guide us.
You know, you can. I tell an amusing story in the memoir. When I got into Parliament in Rhodesia, we had national parks and game departments, two different departments looking after wildlife. This didn't make sense, and I wanted them amalgamated and headed by a scientist and not an accountant. I was wrong on that, but that was my belief at the time. So I wanted that. Nobody else in the country did. Nobody in the departments did because they were developing their own departments. Everybody in the public was apathetic, and I achieved that in, I think, about 3 months. Now, I achieved it by just simply writing letters to about 6 people around the country and saying, please put this in your own words and send it to the Guelph Times, the Bulawayo Chronicle, the Mtali Post, the various towns and cities' main newspapers. Send them to the letters to the press in your own words, but on these dates. So I spaced them, and these letters began appearing, asking for a commission of inquiry. That's all. Just let's have a commission of inquiry into wildlife management in Rhodesia. Now, in Parliament, I cut out those from the newspapers, put them in a scrapbook, and just started showing them to other members of Parliament, saying, my God, look at the concern around the country. We better have this commission. And then we had a caucus meeting, and I put it to the Prime Minister, and I said, Prime Minister, there's a lot of concern around the country, and it makes sense to me that we just have a commission of inquiry. And nobody could argue against that. So it was announced. We got a commission of inquiry, and I recommended George Petrides, Professor of Wildlife Management from Michigan State. And he was brought out to Rhodesia, and we had the Petrides report, and we amalgamated the departments. That took one person and 6 letters, and it was achieved in a few months. If you care enough, you'll bring about the very thing I've been talking about at COP26. It just needs somebody who cares enough. And anybody could do that.
Yeah, and Alan, what about, do you think the part of the reason it hasn't caught on is because there's we're up against a financial battle as well as
I've never been opposed by any financial institution, none. Even Syngenta has reposted some of my tweets more than environmental organizations have. To this day, no financial vested interest has opposed me. The only opposition has been professional egos, institutional professional egos. And it's wrong to say we haven't got any. We've got thousands of people practicing and managing holistically around the world, but it's individuals. We've got to take it to scale, otherwise we fail. So no, we're doing amazingly well, but it's my anxiety is amazingly well isn't good enough when your building is burning down and the flames are 100 foot high, and you've brought in the fire extinguishers and you've poured on all the water you can, and you've got the flames down to 20 foot high. It's no good congratulating yourself, your damned house is burning down. So I don't want to preach to the choir anymore. I want us to get out there at scale and let's solve this damn problem if we want a future. If we don't want a future, I can tell you what it'll be. Cities failing and violence that the world has never known. As 9 billion people start rebelling as cities fail. And it will happen if we keep destroying our environment to produce cheap, unhealthy food to keep political parties in power, whether they're democracies or dictatorships. I don't give a damn. I was recently in Hungary, and I spoke to a group of younger people one evening, and I said, I don't understand you guys. It's the first time I've been in Eastern Europe, and while I've been going around with Jodie and I, my wife and I, were about 10 days, I think. We'd gone for a wedding there. And I said, while I've been going around, I've been hearing you ridiculing the Soviet occupation period when you were under communist rule and the agricultural policies coming from communist bureaucrats in Moscow, where you said destroying your culture, destroying your land, destroying your economy, and you ridiculed, you rebelled against it. I said, I've now been going around hearing the same thing, how the policies coming from democratic governments and democratic bureaucrats in Brussels is destroying your land, destroying your economy, etc. I said, it's exactly the same. It doesn't make any damn difference whether you're under extreme right or extreme left rule. It makes no difference. Political parties develop policy the same way. Tell me what the difference is, and nobody could.
And that's why we need holistic management, because it brings people together.
So what's frustrating is to have thousands of people, because I worked with 2,000 people, as I told you, that the USDA commissioned me to do, conclude that policies were universally unsound, and then have it suppressed by the very agency that commissioned it, the USDA, that banned further training. And I've been battling universities and agencies since. And then again, a couple of people protested, I think 2 lost their jobs, and then everybody shut up. And the agencies got away with it.
Why did they shut it down?
Now 300,000 a year die.
And why did they shut it down, Allan?
For the reasons I explained to you earlier. They knew these 2 discoveries were not new, they were wrong. They knew that you can solve biodiversity, desertification with technology and fire. They know that. Despite no science, no proof, no evidence, they knew that livestock cause it. That's why they shut it down. They knew that you can develop policies in many ways, democratically, dictatorially, scientifically. When we discovered no matter what government's in power, policies developed exactly the same way. They knew that was wrong. That's why they shut it down. Professional egos, institutional egos, far more powerful vested interest than financial vested interests.
I'm just letting that sink in, because that is, I don't think that people talk about that very much. I don't think people have an understanding of how powerful institutions are and how powerful ego.
Well, I saw a very good write-up. I don't want to get into the politics of it here, but you know what's going on in America today, which is bordering on absolute insanity. And a very good article, I think it was, I'm not sure, New York Times or somewhere, pointed out that basically underlying that is a rebellion against bureaucracy. And bureaucracy is that our institutions have got right out of control. Yes, I agree with that. I don't agree with the way of addressing it, because they won't do any better.
Yeah.
When I go for medical treatment, as I was in the dentist yesterday, they always get me to fill out a form. Do I have any, what do they call them, allergies? And I always say, yes, I've got 2. One is atropine, because I'm allergic to it, very, very allergic. And the other is bureaucracy. And funnily enough, the nurse started writing that down, and then she burst out laughing. But most of us are allergic to bureaucracy. It's dominating our lives today, and it shouldn't be.
Right.
And
And
develop policy in the interests of institutions. Please believe me, your lives will be dominated by rules, regulations and ever more bureaucracy. When you develop policies, as we do holistically, in the interests of citizens, you suddenly find way more rules, regulations, and control because people all want the same thing. You're only getting the opposite because institutions don't want the same thing. They want to stay in power. They want to finance themselves. They want to grow. They have to. Even our churches. Damn it, when will we learn?
Hopefully, people listening are learning in this moment. Allan, what can we look forward to in your memoir? You have a memoir coming out in the next few
Uh,
months. What can we look forward to in that?
what's I
What
didn't
can we
hear.
look forward to in your memoir that's coming
Oh,
out?
you can look forward to as simple an explanation as I can give of why what we've talked about, all right, could never have been developed by any one person. I could never have developed what we're talking about. No university could, no one country could, no time in history. So it's a description of that and how these lessons of tracking years in the army, particularly tracking ecology, going into parliament, becoming president of a political party, being forced into exile, but throughout it all, poor land leads to poor people, social breakdown, war, violence, and throughout it all, starting as a youngster, I was just changing my cap, whether I was in Parliament or in the army or advising in countries nearby, because I was consulting in 5 countries, had my own planes and flew to them. And whatever day I was just changing cap, always the same problem. And then when I got in exile, brought over to the United States, I worked with 2,000 scientists because they were aware of the work I was doing until USDA banned it, banned further training. And that was incredibly productive period, working with 2,000 people in bureaucracies, brilliant people, caring people, but they couldn't stop their own agencies banning the training.
But we can. The more of us that talk about it, and the more of us that write letters, the more of us that make phone calls.
If you take one country, Canada, one person could stop it by just caring enough
Mm,
to investigate, follow up, talk to me, make a plan, build a small group of 2 or 3 people, talk to your prime minister.
and so be it, and so it is. Thank you for your time today, Allan. Thank you.
Well, thank you for what you're doing, helping me spread the word, even though I express my frustration. But I
Well,
hope people forgive my frustration. After 70 years, I've got tired of all the blaming, accusing, arguing, and not looking at simple solutions.
And that's what I love most about this conversation is how you really have shown us how to simplify a very complex
Yeah.
idea. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
If people want to learn more about your work, Alan, where's the best place for them to find you?
Savory Institute, and they've got the website there. There's the textbook. There's various things, various podcasts. People can, if they're desperate enough, they can even just email me. Just communicate. We're trying to make the information as available as we can. Savory Institute's got hubs in many countries. We're trying to work through hubs people, and those are nearly all farmers, or they are all farmers. I'm hoping we can even develop hubs in cities because it's a city problem, and they support the farmers. But still, at the end of the day, you have to change policy. Otherwise, what we're doing is not going to work.
Learn more about Allan Savory's work at the Savory Institute. You can find him on the web at savory.global, on Instagram at Savory Institute, on Facebook at savory.global, and YouTube at Savory Institute. And be sure to check out Allan's brand new memoir coming out. And may your hearts flourish as you ponder the question, how do you want your life to be? And what are the decisions and what are the actions you will take to make it so? Big love. Make yourself an amazing day. I love you. Namaste.